So what I'm gonna talk to you about for a short while today, I guess I'll describe as potentially either innovative or offensive, depending on your camp. And let's see, is that not on? There we go. So I'll give you, as brief as possible, just some background information, sort of where I've come from, why I've gotten to the point where we're at Parkland right now. 2/3 of our incoming freshmen place into what we describe as developmental math. So that means before college algebra level. And that's not a number that any of us are proud of, but it's a reality, and it's not unique to Parkland. It's pretty much the standard at most two-year institutions around the country, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then an important point is that of those students, 3/4 of them are what we describe as non-STEM students, students who don't need college algebra, calculus, trigonometry. That's not their aspiration. They simply need either a liberal arts math class or an intro stats class to get their 4-year degree. And that fact has really shaped a lot of the changes that have happened at Parkland and are starting to happen nationally. Approximately 50% success rates at each of 3 levels of algebra. Again, something that we're not happy about, not proud of, but, and is very, very typical. And so I tell people, it's been joked, again, this is potentially offensive, but I didn't say it, so I can say it that way. That change in math happens one retirement at a time. I told my former department chair and co-author there that what we were doing at Parkland, and he said, "You know, Brian, change in math happens one retirement at a time." And that's obviously a joke, because sometimes the innovators are the people that have been around a while, and sometimes they're the ones that are holding things back. So it's just funny more than anything. But so here's our old sequence. This is what things used to look like for pretty much forever at Parkland and most community colleges. Students could place as far back as pre-algebra. They can obviously place before that. That's considered part of the adult ed area if they place before pre-algebra. But pre-algebra, beginning algebra, intermediate algebra, and then once we all get to intermediate algebra, then we as mathematicians have always said, well, then you've at least mastered what was supposed to be done in high school. Now we'll let you go to a college level course. And so the split happened after intermediate algebra. The split of where students go took place after intermediate algebra. And what made this a challenge, and this has been, you know, the 50% success rates and these sorts of things have been problems for a long time at a lot of institutions. And as people tried to tackle this problem, it was sort of 2 competing ideas. If you think of pre-algebra as pre-calculus, then you have to treat those students one way. And in particular, when we focus on intermediate algebra, you have to treat those students, well, if you're going to take college algebra, we've got to make sure that you're really good at simplifying complex rational expressions and doing all those other sorts of fun things that have use if you're going on to a calculus track. But at the same time, to the 3/4 of our students who are in that class who are not trying to get to college algebra, it's kind of hard to justify. And this is the other offensive piece, quite honestly. And you'll get people sort of still on both sides of this fence when you say, you know, maybe intermediate algebra isn't the best thing to require all students to take. Some people are still firmly entrenched in, nope, if it's not intermediate algebra, we're not going to count it. Well, fortunately, Illinois now, just in the last year, 4-year institutions and 2-year institutions have approved a new path, and that's one of the things I'll talk to you about, where we take the students who are non-STEM and split them off at a much earlier point. So just that sort of shaped our conversation and shaped sort of a lot of the problems that we had. As I said, we looked at a number of initiatives and a number of redesign programs. They all still amounted to the same thing, ultimately trying to fit square pegs into round holes. And once we stumbled upon this, then things sort of clicked. So just a little bit more background. Me personally, I taught our beginning and intermediate accelerated course that did them both in one semester. So this is 10 hours of algebra we do in one semester. And my mode there was lecture, lecture, lecture as fast as possible. I mean, it was just warp speed lecture. My idea of group work was, I'm going to talk as fast as I can, as fast as you can tolerate it, and then I'm going to say, okay, you do these 2 problems with your neighbor, and then we're going to talk about them really fast. And if you need help, you're going to come see me after class. And it was fairly successful, and I did have fun doing it. But now looking back, I just cringe, and I'll touch at that more later. This you may not find quite as interesting, but back in 2003, I can't believe it was that long ago, we at Parkland piloted what was called a intermediate stats combo course. And the idea was, well, we're going to do students who finish beginning algebra, and we're going to do just-in-time remediation of the intermediate algebra that's needed for our intro stats class. And the people who are teaching it all unanimously said, there's no intermediate algebra needed for this stats class, so I don't know what the point is. And unfortunately, even though students successfully completed that class and successfully completed the stats class after it, we pulled the plug because we weren't compliant with IAI and whoever else you want to point to. But that's something that really agitated a lot of us, that we had to stop offering that course, and to sort of help shape where we were, where we got to today. I already mentioned this, but we'd considered several redesign plans as a department, and again, the square pegs round hole argument came up, and it was, the folks who were concerned with our college algebra path said, well, we don't want to do too much to intermediate algebra because we got to make sure they're ready for college algebra. And some other folks said, yeah, but most of these students aren't trying to get to college algebra, and we as a department just couldn't agree on making a change, quite frankly. Those last 2 points I'll say at the same time. Back in 2009, the 2-year college organization, AMATIC, started a New Life committee that sort of said, let's reinvigorate developmental education. And sort of from that conversation, offshoot, was the Carnegie folks got involved, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation got involved, and there's where Statway and Quantway sort of came from. So I can see some of you have heard of that as well. And all of these things are really about sort of what we're talking about, getting a different path for our non-STEM students, which constitutes most of the students in these courses. About that same time, our administration basically said, look, what we're doing isn't working. And they were it was done in a very supportive way. I know there are places where people are told, this isn't working, blow it up, but we were told, this isn't working, you make some decisions on what you to do before you're told what to do by the state or by someone else. So that sort of gave us the encouragement to say, all right, let's look again. And once we found this New Life idea of that, I was giving credit there to the AMATIC folks. There's their vision, and the new course that we developed and are now teaching at Parkland is that one. That's the math literacy course, and their vision that I wholeheartedly support is that course sort of becomes the starting point for most developmental students, and then from there, if they decide that they want to go on a science-based path, they can say, okay, well then we'll take a transitions course or an intermediate algebra course and then go on that path. But for the majority of students from that new course, they can go on to their intro level math courses and yeah. So forgot to say this as well. Please feel free to just interrupt me at any point. So don't hesitate if questions arise. Click. There we go. So I have to share this just because I find it hilarious. That apparently this is a well-known quote in Texas. Yes. You know this? Okay. I looked it up, and apparently it's true. So we just sort of took that into mind, as I said, when you're hearing, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but states like Connecticut and Florida their legislators have passed laws that basically said, no more developmental education. You can't require students to take anything. It doesn't matter where they place. They could say, I'm ready to take calculus, and they can do it. And the real kicker, I've spoken with a lot of people in Florida, the real disaster to this is that not only can they not mandate students to take a developmental education course, but their funding is still tied to student success. So now we're tying funding to the wisdom of an 18-year-old. right? And so there are all kinds of things happening. But point is, in Illinois, fortunately, we are at least enough ahead of the legislators that we've made some decisions and passed some things before they got involved and made bad decisions for us. So what did we do? We formed another committee and we decided to offer this new course, math literacy, right? It's a new developmental course for non-STEM students. And so we used to at Parkland offer 25 beginning algebra courses in a semester. Now we offer 5 because most of the students are in this other class. And the other thing I intended to say and didn't, or I sort of touched on it, the mode of instruction for all these developmental classes are, I'm up here, talk, 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 they're out here, write, and try our best to keep them engaged, and pretty traditional stuff. What we've done now is still pre-algebra is a prerequisite. Students have to have that to be in this new course, but now students can go one of 2 places, and as I said, most students are over here. That dotted line is just to represent that if students do that and complete it and say, you know what, and I tell them that one of my goals is to inspire them to go into a more math-intensive path. They complete that class, they can go to intermediate algebra, so in terms of semesters, they haven't really lost anything, and then could still go on to college algebra pre-calc. But for the vast majority of our students, they go here and then either to a intro stat or a liberal arts math class. So that's just sort of set the stage for what we've done at Parkland and what this new course is. Now, what's it about? We wanted to create an alternate but still very, very challenging path. And again, back to what I said at the beginning, that this is somewhat offensive to some math people. We asked the question, is intermediate algebra the right material to prepare a student for a stats course or a liberal arts math course, and more importantly, just to prepare students sort of thinking about this as almost the last taste of math they're ever going to see. Is this how we want to send them out into the world, right? And I would strongly argue the answer is no to that, at least that last part. A lot of context. So the problems that we look at are very, very, very contextual. Almost every day I describe kind of looks like a physics lab where we say, okay, here's some problems we're going to tackle, go at it. And I'll talk more about sort of what I do on a daily basis, but a lot of context. I wanted to be very relevant. We touch on some things that are interesting to college students, is what all that means. Focus on critical thinking. I'm here to admit this to you. A lot of what we do when I think about my intermediate algebra students that come out of my classes, are they good at critical thinking, or are they, even the A students, or are they just good at, well, they can crank out these kinds of problems that I put in front of them, and a few word problems, right? That even those are more or less canned. But what we spend a lot more time on in this class is critical thinking, throwing problems that don't necessarily have an answer, or don't necessarily have one answer, and allowing them to struggle with that and to realize that that's more realistic. Address the needs of students. We realize that these students aren't good students. They're not good math students, and they're not good students in general. So we spend a lot of time coaching, a lot of time, just focusing on good study habits, setting schedules, and those sorts of things. So,
and Brian, by good students, you don't mean that they lack the desire, just the skills and the experience to do that. That is, that you're doing some kind of mentoring.
Absolutely.
Well,
there's a lot of mentoring, and when I say not good students, it's in many cases I find they've never learned how to be good students. They want to be, but maybe they don't understand that doing homework or studying for an exam while the TV is on and while no pencil is in your hand, looking at notes, that's not studying, right? And it's a performance art, and so telling them things like that is what they need to hear.
But that was productive for them in high school. Right.
Unfortunately, it was.
Right.
I don't know the productive, but it worked.
Right.
Yeah. Agreed.
So it's not that they're not successful students, they just haven't adjusted to their new environment.
For a lot of these students, well, I think it's both. For a lot of these students, they certainly haven't been successful math students, because if they had been, they most likely wouldn't have placed at this level. Right? That's that's the important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions I had was how, in your experience, or what have you studied, where they really do come from high schools that didn't prepare them for their next environment.
You're asking whether I think the high schools prepared them?
There's an onus of responsibility. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Students come out of high school, I think, almost best case scenario, in my opinion, learning to play the game. Worst case scenario, they come out of high school with a bad taste for math, and you know, I talk to them a lot about they've had their noses bumped so many times that they give up. Either in general, like when it comes to math in general, or especially when it comes to a particular, so to solving a problem that involves math. As soon as they feel that bump, they're done. And I mean, I think a lot of these students, that's where they're at.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean. Learning to bump your nose and be okay with that and keep going is one of the things we talk a lot about.
So that's part of the mentoring.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yep. Revised teaching methods. So one of the things we said was just to stand up in front and them sit there and write isn't going to be what we're going to do. And so I'll show you a little bit more about that here shortly. An accessible style, again, we wanted this to be very demanding. And all my students will say this is by no means an easy class. They don't think that this is the easy way out. They think it's incredibly challenging. We expect a lot in terms of their time, a lot in terms of their study habits. I think we're sort of addressing them as not just math students, but as overall just college students. And so just, again, the mentoring and coaching and those sorts of things we focus on quite a bit. Setting expectations. So I don't know if you can read that. You probably can, okay. But I tell people that this played itself out in one of my classes where a student who early on in the semester we conduct a poll and then do some analysis where we're basing on students' opinions of math. Do you like it, love it, hate it, and where are you on the scale? And one of my students who was in the I hate math category, she'd had her nose bumped so many times, she'd failed a math class at Parkland before we started offering this class, and she jumped into it. And she was like an unbelievable student. I was shocked to find out that she had failed a class before, and I got to talking to her. She says, I figured this out. She says, I read everything beforehand, I try to do as much as I can before class, and then when I come to class, I'm able to focus just on the things that I don't understand. I mean, she's doing all the things that a really good student ought to do, but she's figured that out, right? And what's the definition of smart, right? And that's so I talk a lot about those things, right? Format of the class, very few lectures, 0 lectures on a whole, but I mean very little time is spent lecturing. I'm up at the front of the class hardly ever, as we'll see shortly. Active participation is required. Students, again, these students who maybe aren't confident math students are used to being able to sit there like this and be chilled out and be left alone and know that if I don't participate, as long as I don't cause trouble, no one's going to bug me. Well, that's just not even close to an option. Not even close. And some resist that at first, but then when they realize that it pays off, they enjoy it. Yes, we do a lot of reading. Yes, we do a little bit of writing. And by technology, I mean, we do use the graphing calculator for some things, but we do a lot with Excel that students immediately see value in, because everyone, whether it's necessarily true or not, most people have the impression that Excel is something that is used in the real world. And so when they see some math tied to Excel and how it fits together, they really get excited and see it as useful.
How big are the classrooms? Yeah. How number of students? What's the classroom setup? What grouping is there?
Give me one slide and I'll show you.
Okay, gotcha.
So we do a whole lot with group work. Group work is mandatory. It's a mandatory part of the course, both inside and outside of class. And I'll flat out tell people when I talk about this class, this was not my comfort zone, but quite frankly, I couldn't see going back. I couldn't see going back. If I go teach a calc class, I would do a lot of these things, and the next time I teach calc. So I mean, it's transforming, quite honestly. Technology used for basic skills. Students appreciate this as well. So in the materials we use, we don't spend a whole lot of time lecturing over what I describe the simple, silly little things that they don't really ask many questions about anyway. So that's done all on just web-based assignments. They have multiple attempts. It's brief, simple little explanations for the skills that are associated with the lesson. They like the fact that we don't waste any time talking about those things in class. What does the class look like? That. So somebody came to observe my classroom. And so to answer your question before I forget, we have the classes restricted to 24. We have tables that are a little bit smaller than this, enough for 2 people, and then they put 2 of those tables together, so it's groups of 4, right? And then we just kind of move around the class that way. So you can see, let's see, I think there's 1 table, 2 tables, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's your 24 students. 1 student was absent on table F. And then, so you can see there's the front of the room where I was talking a little bit throughout the period, but most of my time is spent just running around, and I tell people I feel like I've walked 18 holes of golf by the time I get done with a class. Because, you know, and in fact, when I say very few lectures, most of the lecturing that I do, just the way I handle this class, and some people do it a little bit different, but the way I handle it, is I call them just-in-time lectures. I'll wait until this table is ready, or maybe this table and this table is ready, and I'll go get down on my knees between the 2 tables and say, all right, listen, you guys are ready to hear this. Let's talk about this and make sure you got this important idea. But I wait until they've struggled a little bit before I do that. And there's a delicate balance between letting students get frustrated and letting them, again, feel that I want them to bump their nose. And I tell them, I want you to bump your nose and then see that it's going to be okay. And I think that by the end of the semester, they've gotten comfortable with that. And that's it's just been awesome, quite honestly. I tell people this is the most fun I've had teaching. I've been at Parkland 15 years now, 16 years. And this is by far the most fun I've had teaching in the whole time I've been there. A lot more interaction with students, a lot more good questions, a lot more opportunities to hear what they really don't understand, the things that they'd never ask if I were up here and they were all sitting down there. I'll get to talk about or hear them talking to their group about and then address. And so even that part of it is amazing.
How many days of the week and for how long do they meet like this?
We meet 3 days a week, 2 hours each day.
2 hours. Do you find they get cognitive exhausted after an amount of time?
We take a break in the middle.
Okay.
And I tell them, you know, people have, again, different ways that they've handled this. Some, and if you're not careful, some students turn this into, well, I see that this is the goal for the day. If I get it done, I get to leave early. And so I don't let them do that at all at the very beginning. If they get done early, they're the ones who are going to be presenting on the board. And, you know, if they leave, they lose participation points. And, you know, so we structure it to where that doesn't happen early on. But in terms of the exhaustion, it's broken up enough that no, we don't see a lot of that at all. And they all tell me that the class goes by so fast. And you know, these, and again, I just like to point out, and this may be hard to relate to, but see, these are, so now it was 75% were non-STEM and 25% at least you could look them in the eye and say, you really need to know this if you think you're going to take college algebra. These are the groups of students who want as little math as possible, right? And you're putting them all in one room together, and they're excited. They talk about how class goes fast. They enjoy it, and you know. So without sounding mean, it's almost the worst subset of math students that you might have, all put together. But you know, it just seems to work out so well. It's just like I said, it's unbelievably rewarding. So, other questions? I don't know. Sure.
Can I throw something in about this graph? I initially, when I was working with Abigail to make this tool, I had a hypothesis about quality teaching being one that kind of looked like that. But as I've been observing more and more classes, it seems to me that the indicator of quality teaching is that an observer gets to know the students as learners, even as an outsider. And that's really the exciting thing about that. It's the motion that you have there and the questions and the data I can take on. But I also felt as though each of those numbered yellow and purple dots were people who's, as learners, you get to understand how they're talking to each other and what their anxieties were, you know, some that are very frightened about or want to be right every time, or how they share with each other. So you feel as though you're getting to know them as learners because you can hear their interactions with you and with each other. And that I think is going to be the more enduring indicator as I'm seeing, you know, how this mapping tool is playing out.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because all the students are in groups, do you ever find that some groups are kind of led by a certain individual and maybe some other individuals fall to the side because that person may
So one of
give them the answers?
absolutely.
give them most of the work?
So one of the things that we've started doing this semester is assigning roles each day. So now I'm going to draw a complete blank, and I didn't put that in the slide. But one person is the recorder. One person is allowed to roam to other groups. One person is going to present. You know, if we break things up and present problems on the board. And there's a fourth one, and I know I'm going to forget that one. But the point is, each person has a role, and then we mix that up so that one person can't just sort of take things over. And that's worked really well so far this semester to help ease that issue. Because, yeah, that can happen. And you know, I tell people when I had to talk to all of our instructors who are teaching this semester and last, one of the hardest parts about this course, quite honestly, is managing the groups. Because they get to know one another so well that can become bad. And so what I've settled into as every unit, break things up and mix it up. And some of them, boy, they really get upset about having to, oh, I like working with this group. And you know, sometimes I can tell just sort of by the volume of the how loud it gets in class that maybe we're a little bit off task. But for the most part, you know, there's good loud and bad loud, and for the most part, it's good loud.
So do they have assigned seats, or do they have a different group every day? I think you said
Not a
you
different
have
group every
unit.
day, so a different group every unit. So like these 4 people, 9, 11, 16, 14, they were together for 4 weeks. And so, you know, it's long enough, and they have a group project that they work on outside of class to go with the unit. And so it's long enough that they get to know one another, and then every new unit, they exchange email information and contact information with a new set, and then said, you know, this is like real life. You've got to learn to work with different types of people you may not agree with or get along with, but this is a good skill too. And they, you know, they get used to it. Yeah.
Do you adjust the pace to the students, so you have a set curriculum that you follow regardless?
For the most
And
part, oh, go ahead.
Okay, maybe the other side, what kind of help could they get in or out of the class to manage?
So for the most part, when we were designing things, we planned it to where they'd get done in class. And in fact, the way it's timed out, most students get done with what I describe as the lesson portion, and then actually are able to maybe start their homework. And I sort of there's a carrot for them that if they stay on task and really focus, that not only will they get done with everything that we need to get done with, but they'll actually have time to get started briefly on their homework, oftentimes before class ends. And you know, initially I had mixed feelings about that, but I think I'd rather that than be rushed for time. And it works out well. And then they, you know, some of them will just stay in class when class is over, and they'll just stay there and work. We have peer tutoring where they'll go down and work in the tutoring center and can get help from one of the tutors if they need it, or just work as a group in the nice big tables down there.
And do they use it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, sorry for coming in late.
No problem.
And, I missed most of your talk, and I wondered if you try to get an understanding of the misconceptions students have prior to the onset of a unit, about the unit, to see like what common things they don't know, or do you teach from an expert model, and just sort of try to help them in the way you think they need help, or in other words, also, do you give a diagnostic test at all?
We don't. We don't, and I guess one way I guess I'd address that is, and as we talked about this in our committee, this class is not really like our intermediate algebra class in that we're not saying you need to come out of this class, you know, having completely mastered this and this and this and this and this objective. Almost equally important to the mathematics that's in the class is the learning how to be a good math student pieces that we build into it. And so that's not to say that the mathematics that's in the course isn't important, but we don't do a pre-assessment or anything else before we get started. We sort of just...
They're identified from a placement test though, right?
So you mean before the whole course starts?
Right.
Yes. So they take a placement test. If they place out of pre-algebra, so minimal skills there of arithmetic and a little bit of algebra knowledge, if they place out of that class, then they're okay to start this one.
Do you see any changes in the work of students after this course or out of this course?
So far from our year of piloting, those students did better than the students who placed into our stats courses and our liberal arts math courses. And we knew this was going to be the case. I mean, I've told everybody from the beginning, this is like teed up to succeed. Because we demand so much more of these students in terms of the critical thinking, the reading, the problem solving, and go into a liberal arts math class or a stats class. Those are some of the skills that you need to have. And our students who either placed there means that it would indicate that they've probably just gone through the high school curriculum of intermediate algebra and then there they start, or the students who took our intermediate algebra course and are already in that class. Like I said, our students are actually doing better, which is very exciting.
So earlier you mentioned you had a 50% rate for the students. Has that increased with this class?
With this class, it was in the mid-60s, which is an improvement, considerable improvement when you go that route. And I want to be careful. I don't want to. To me, success is how they do in the next class. And I want students to succeed in this class, and I'm glad to see that number higher. But I would have been nervous if it would have been 90% succeeding. Then I think, well, maybe this is not quite as challenging as it should be. Because I feel like it's still a very, very challenging course. It's just different. And to go all the way back to the beginning, that this course is sort of getting some traction nationally. It's enough people are saying, you know what? I think I'm ready to acknowledge that intermediate algebra isn't the most appropriate thing for these students. And that's where some people are still, nope, draw the line, and some are changing the tune.
Has your experience with this course informed your curriculum or the way you teach the pre-calc course?
Yes, and that's what I haven't taught it because I've been so focused on this class, but that's what I've said. As people teach this class and then come out of it, people are saying, I think I need to change some of the things I'm doing in some of these other classes. And so some of those conversations are actually happening just over the last semester and into this one. And so I definitely see this making some impact on how our other courses are taught as well. Definitely.
How long have you been doing it?
So we have been, this will be, I'm going to count right, this was the 4th semester. So we did a year of piloting, and then we did full implementation in the fall. And this is our 2nd semester of full implementation of this new course, this new track.
I'm just going to say, my intuition here is that the splitting of the two, STEM, non-STEM, is, because I taught in the physics department, and it's been taught physics for years. We have calc-based and algebra-based.
Sure.
And it's very intuitive, like what goes into the curriculum for algebra-based students, especially when you're talking about this is going to be a terminal class for them, and they may never use this information ever. What do we really want to impart? I mean, you're looking at, they may take stats or whatever.
Well, they have to, the students in this class have to take one more.
One more, right.
Right.
So, like, in an integrated curriculum, what do they need to know down the road, whereas the other ones are a little bit more, what curriculum goes there? So that, I guess, like I said, my intuition for the 2 different tracks is seems spot on. What do we want them to know? What are the critical skills? And the context that we teach that knowledge in, that's the curriculum and instruction. That's the things that you can, and that transcends disciplines, right? You can change disciplines on that. So that was the comment I had. I don't know if there's a question in there, but so more of a request for conversation or just to, reaffirm that seems like the right thing to do.
I agree completely, yeah.
But I think it's important to acknowledge the inspirational role that you're hoping to play. That is, that there is a chance and perhaps even a likelihood that a lot of the students have been so turned off to math
Absolutely.
that they have rejected STEM because of their prior experience. So for lack of a better word, there's a therapeutic aspect to the class that may have some capacity to change students into a direction that they might be more willing to take the risks to move into some more challenging mathematics and even a STEM-oriented career.
Yeah, I assume it's too early to have tracked any of that kind of
Yeah,
information.
it is. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But it'll be interesting to see.
We have a couple students who've tried, but they're doing it this semester,
Right.
so I don't know.
It'll be really interesting
Yeah.
to see if you
Yeah.
get some recruitment in this.
Yeah, yeah.
So based on my understanding, most of their grades come from group work, homework, and their group projects.
So I wouldn't say, well,
Basically what I'm asking.
with all those things, yes. But no, we have exams as well. So we
Yeah.
have unit exams. They're on their own. The homework, the majority of that is done on their own. They're allowed to work on it in groups. Then we have a homework quiz every day that's done individually. And then the group project is certainly done as a group.
So I guess their group work is graded as a group. Have you noticed that their performance on exams seems higher than students who don't do group work? Or how do you think being able to do a lot of group work affects their individual performance when it's kind of a timed, you have to complete this many problems in this much time situation?
I don't think that's something that we've tracked. I mean, I don't know that I'd be able to give an honest answer in terms of whether I think they would do better. But it's certainly a good question.
I'm just wondering, kind of following up to George's question, a lot of the students come into this class, like you said before, they're not excited about math, they don't think they're going to do well in math. Do you see a transition of certain students throughout the semester? And then also, is there a certain, I guess, I don't want to say stereotype, but archetype of a student who probably won't do as well? I mean, is part of the 40% that isn't going to do as well?
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be students who, and again, I'm talking just from a community college perspective, there are going to be students whose lives get in the way of no matter what it is they're trying to do. And so we unfortunately have to accept the fact that there are some students that it doesn't matter what model we try, what we do, they're not going to be successful. But I think that, yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm losing my train of thought. That's all right. I was trying to remember your other question now. What was it? You asked two questions.
The transition through the semester of certain students from going to not be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The transition. So, with the students who are here that we see, you're talking about them transferring the students who are going to change tracks.
Not necessarily change tracks, but come into the semester thinking, I've never been good at math, I've never had math, and then at the end of the semester being kind of more excited about it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So students, that I think happens almost across the board. I can't tell you how many good evaluations I've gotten, and I don't mean good on me, but just good on the course, and how I can just clearly see their attitudes throughout the semester improve. And I go back to the bump in your nose thing. And it's all of these students, in my opinion, have bumped their nose and done it so many times that their reaction is, as soon as it hurts, I quit, right? And think about it in terms of training for a sport or anything else. And with this, they get enough of a taste of struggle and then I'm okay, and struggle some more and I'm still okay, that by the end, even some of the students who in an algebra class, you'd lose them so fast, it's not even funny, have made that transition. And that's why I think they're more successful when they take the other class. Got it.
Did you develop the curriculum yourself, or are you using something, or a combination?
We did. So, as you know, Jim Hall and I worked on beginning and intermediate algebra traditional text for a number of years. And McGraw-Hill, our publisher, contacted me about the time the Amatic New Life and the Statway Quantway stuff was gaining traction, and said, hey, I think a lot of the philosophies you guys took with this might fit well with this new course. Would you consider working on something? So like a fool, I said, oh, sure. I thought I'd be able to do this and just tweak that and it'd work fine. And that was far from the truth. They paired me up with a guy who has written several liberal arts math books, the course that many students will go into after this one. And so he and I have actually developed the materials that we're using. So, been fun.
how many teachers bought into it, and what do you do for teachers' development, professional?
So right now, Aaron Wilding Martin and I are the coordinators for this course, and so we have several meetings before the semester starts. The people who are going to teach this class have to observe our classes before they teach it, and then there are ongoing trainings and discussions that take place. So we sort of said baptism by fire in some sense, but the people who are teaching it have all, for the most part, had very good experiences, and we'll, like I said, have conversations with them from time to time, but for the most part, that's gone well.
Is it paid observation when they go to observe classes? Is it part of the?
It is
job?
actually. It is. It's the school supported us, as I said, with the administration saying, you have our permission to blow it up before the state tells you to blow it up. They pledged and have given us a lot of support and a lot of leeway. When we proposed this new course at the curriculum committee, we got an applause before the committee went out to vote on whether they were going to approve this course. There's just the reaction, the story at Parkland is just amazing. What's happened with this class. So there's just a lot of excitement from a lot of people, and I just observed one of the night instructors last evening, and had a great conversation with him about, and this is his second time teaching it, and he said, I had fun the first time, he said this time's even better, and he was one who sort of made a few mistakes in terms of setting things up from the beginning, and I saw him, I mentioned the groups, I saw him mentioning to his students, he said, now your exam is coming up next week, and on the next day after the exam, you're going to have new groups, and we're going to enjoy this, right? And so he was having fun with that, but just setting the stage to make sure they understand that when we change groups, that's part of the process.
Were there teachers who left this program, kind of, that couldn't get used to it, or didn't buy into it?
Not yet. I won't say it won't happen, and I won't pretend to say that it's for everyone. I know there's some people say, I don't know if that's my style. And like I said, I'll be honest with you. When I said I was going to try this, I thought, oh my goodness, this is not my comfort zone. But I'm gonna dive in and see how it goes. And it's just been fun. So.
I don't know what I'm asking here, but
I hope I do.
to what extent is this a curriculum innovation, and to what extent is it a change in instruction and delivery?
That's a good question. Yeah.
To what extent? I'd say it's about equal parts. I think, as we talked about this as a committee, I think the change in instruction delivery, I think, was just as important as the change in curriculum. The topics we look at are and I didn't say this, but I have like 2 more slides, but make sure I don't say anything. I've already talked about all that, blah, 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 and that's my last one. I was sent as a thank you. But as we talked about this as our committee, we said that, we don't want this to be just the same old in every conceivable way. Because as I said, these students have all had math and not been good at it and struggled with it and had a bad taste. And so part of the again, borderline offensive thinking here is we're not going to do the same thing in the same way and expect a different result, right? And so we said we're going to, different curriculum, and one of the things that I was getting ready to say, so these students that come out of this class can tell me a lot more about the difference between linear and exponential growth. They can tell me a lot more about what slope really means. Far more than my beginning or intermediate algebra students ever could. And so there are things that to me are real and valuable that they are much better at than any of our traditional students. And then, as I said, the delivery, we wanted that to be different as well, just because, as I said, students are used to, I'm up here, they're here, they get stuck, they're afraid to ask, they're used to that cycle. And when I'm walking around the room and they're held accountable to their group members and they know that I'm going to be coming over their shoulder and seeing how they're doing, it's not an option to zone out. And so I think there are a number of things there that come into play. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I have one add-on.
Okay.
as far as there's still a similarity between group learning and teaching in front of the class with respect to incorporating what the student thinks in advance of the content. Again, going back to the misconceptions that they may have. In other words, that would be the same regardless if it's a group situation or a teacher in front of the room situation. There's nothing done differently in terms of the content, what's cognitively in the students' minds about the subject matter. That form of the instructional delivery is still constant.
No, I don't think so.
Well, so here, I guess, tell me if I'm misunderstanding your question, but what I would say to that is when I'm walking around listening to students talk and argue and debate, I get far, far, far more into understanding what they do and don't understand than what I ever did before. So when I see this group really struggling with an idea, I can sit down and have a conversation with them about why. And again, to me, this format allows, sometimes I'll have a group that is just got it, and they'll go walk right through a lesson, and they're working on their homework and finish everything. Can I go? Okay. By the time the further into the semester, we've established routine and expectations. But a group that's really struggling, I get to focus all of my time on them. Or maybe two groups. I say, okay, come here, let's talk about this. And so to me, I get a whole lot more understanding about what they do and don't understand than what I ever did before.
Can I add to from having observed the class, I remember a particular instance that stood out for me of a group that was working on a problem of linear relationships. They had a table of data. I believe it was fees for a college course or something like that. And they had worked really hard, but called Brian to come over because they had the slope, they had the equation, but something was missing. Not all the numbers were working. So he said, you want the equation to tell us, you want all the aspects, the equation and the data to tell one story, and you have a piece here that's not fitting. They didn't have the intercept, basically. They didn't have the y-intercept, the initial fee for just enrolling. And so he left them with that prompt without giving them the answer and went to another table. And the nice thing actually about the tool is because it's got a timestamp, I could see that 3 minutes later, Brian is back to check on that table to see how they were doing. I'm not sure it was that class, but
it was
so
right
it was
there.
table C, and he went over to table L, and then came back to table C to check on that group. And that's what I was saying about the instruction. As an observer, I'm getting a sense of what those students are struggling with as I'm watching the interactions. That is, I know what the content is, but I, as an outsider, am getting a sense of how these, mostly adults, well, all adults, I guess, are learning, and where they're slipping up. So that is different. If Brian were just at the front, I may have a sense of whether they're zoned in or out, but I wouldn't be able to get a sense of where particularly they were struggling and how they were dealing with it as individuals or a group. This way, it's clear as an outsider what's taking place.
I want to throw on the terms, you haven't said it, but the difference between an instructor-centered environment and a learner, right? And you can even go to freer between the banking concept of education and the liberating concept of education. What are we doing with these people when we get them into the classroom? And assessment is one of the biggest things. Like, at what point do I say I'm assessing a student? Every time you walk over to the table, you're assessing the student, and they're getting assessment. And that's why group work works, is because they're getting assessment from their peers as well when you're not even there. They're getting feedback on their understanding, and that's way different than sitting forward in a classroom. Like, they're actually involved in some sort of this is trickled down from cognitive psychology and learning theories. This is all in the modern learning theories, and that it's finally, coming into community colleges and trickling down. Like, hopefully it'll get to high school, right? Hopefully it'll keep going on down. But this is all research-based stuff, This isn't something that you have to say, like, provide, like, there's evidence out here that this works, and how rich it is for each individual in the classroom, and how it contributes to their further education as well. Yeah.
But we learn enough history to know that it was once in school, that it went out of school, and it was in, and it was out. So it's not that we found the light and it's here to stay. And suddenly the psychologist found it, and we are just kind of following the research. There are many more things factors that are things, but I'm very glad to see. May I ask what students say about it? If you could kind of tell us something.
What do students say?
Yes.
My experience, as I said, has been unbelievably positive. A comment that I made earlier is sort of playing back in my mind about when I said this is the worst possible group. I didn't mean the people are the worst, or the worst students. I just mean their attitudes and opinions about math are just kind of the worst case scenario that you could possibly collect in a room. And when you present them with real problems, or and with problems that they can see meaning in, see that, this actually seems realistic. This is something I can relate to, and they're engaged and they can struggle and still succeed. Their attitude it transforms over the course of the semester.
Do you have some in their words, when you ask them to talk about it? You say that you have evaluation of students.
Oh yeah. Okay. So students say it is not like any other math class I've ever had before in my life. That's one thing they say a lot. They say, I had to work my butt off, but it was worth it, and I think I'm actually ready to do well in my stats class, as opposed to dreading it and putting it off to the last possible moment. And so, those, I guess, are two things that I would say would sum up their comments.
Very nice. So they say that it makes them ready. It's not a teacher kind of. It doesn't work only with this teacher, but it makes them a better students.
Better students in general, and better math students. Yes. And I tell them that up front. I tell them that that's a goal, and they tell me that they feel like it was achieved. So.
To a certain degree,
Yeah.
Does it seem like they've gotten better at coming into office hours, or
You know what? That's interesting. So they'll work. They work. I don't know if I'd say that or not, because they work together in groups so much that I'll see them sort of. Maybe I go to them more, because we have kind of study tables scattered around, and so as I'm walking around, in between classes or whatever, I'll see a group of them and end up helping them. So we sort of have a lot of informal office hours. So yes, I think they're more inclined to come for help. A lot of them take advantage of our tutoring center, where they'll just say, okay, here's a time we all have in common. Let's get down here and sit and work together. And I think that that environment, I think, encourages even some of the students who tend to struggle more to participate and say, well, my group's going, I'm going to go down here and get things done. Yeah.
How does students who work manage in this environment?
So that has come up. So, when we have students exchange information at the beginning of a unit and say, well, I don't have this time in common, I don't have this time in common, and every once in a while that happens. And, one of my mottos that I share with them is work it out, figure it out. Either find times to talk on the phone, find times to Skype, find times to whatever. And I won't say that every single group has done that, but for the most part, they understand that this is the expectation of the course, and they've got to find a way to figure that out.
And could they choose another course if they cannot adjust to this expectation?
I say absolutely you can choose another course. There's beginning algebra and intermediate algebra, and it's geared to prepare students for college algebra. And, that's, that. I try to be careful how I say that to students, but I mean, that's not meant to sound like a threat, but it's like, I don't know that that's how you want to do it, right?
It should be dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And some took the options, or some you sent to another?
Well, so this is interesting. So as this course is sort of now popping up in various institutions in Illinois even, in addition to around the country, some counselors and advisors are sort of hesitant to advise students to take this class. Because in Illinois, to get it to pass politically, it had to be a 6-hour class. Now that's something we're working on, but it is a 6-hour course. So from a counselors and advisors point of view, they say, well, you know, gee, I'm going to have students sign up for a 6-hour math class. That's a lot. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. And there are some schools where the counselor and advisors have been like ours, and they've gotten on board completely and said, yes, this makes sense. I understand that beginning and intermediate isn't the right answer for most of these students, so I'm going to shuffle them this direction. So, you know, I don't know. It's interesting to see how that's going to play out in various schools. But as I said, at Parkland, it clicked for everybody. Everybody in our department, this clicked. The whole school said, yep, this makes perfect sense. So.
Can I note for the record that I'm sitting next to Jennifer McNeely, who has been nodding about merit, and so we're sort of bumbling that merit workshop follows, you know,
Yeah.
all of this trajectory and affirms all of these things.
Yeah.
And then that good teaching and impactful student work at the university, I think, and Jennifer can confirm, looks the same. I mean, and employs the same principles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's right, isn't
Yeah,
it?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Erin was a merit TA when she was here, so
Yeah.
I'm sure that helped inform
Yeah,
some of the stuff.
absolutely. No, she gets a lot of credit for it.
It's awesome.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for having me.